Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Los Angeles. I've got another excerpt from a board meeting for you guys today. This is the Losan meeting from last week, where they actually approved a new morning Pacific Surfliner train between Ventura and Santa Barbara for the commuters, about 20,000 of them, who take Route 101 every morning and are stuck in stop-and-go traffic and polluting the beautiful coast up there because there's no morning Surfliner train. So beginning April 2nd, there will be a new morning Surfliner train between Ventura and Santa Barbara. And Losan is the agency that actually manages the Pacific Surfliner, and they don't upload their board meetings automatically to the internet like Metro does. So I just filmed this excerpt of their recent board meeting where they approved that new morning Surfliner between Ventura and Santa Barbara, which will go as far north as Goleta specifically. And I just wanted to upload that here on my YouTube channel to let you guys know the good news, and also to let you know that stuff like this is only possible with the support of the Rail Passengers Association of California. And I would recommend that anybody interested in seeing passenger rail improvements like this in the future join RailPack at railpack.org, or check out the Facebook group at RailPack.
Membership for the calendar year of 2018. The Losan agency bylaws call for the establishment of an executive committee to be comprised of the immediate chair, the vice chair, and the immediate past chair if available. For calendar year 2018, each of these positions is available and represents a nice geographic corridor. Each of the geographic regions is represented with the composition of the executive committee. The specific duties of the executive committee are further outlined in the staff report and in the Losan agency bylaws. It also calls for the board to establish that committee. The item before you seeks to approve the executive committee roster for 2018.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. No questions or discussion? Mr. Dodge?
Director Casano?
Yes.
Director Strong?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Chairman McDonald?
Yes.
Director Ferry?
Yes.
Director Murray?
Yes, if you can hear me. I can't hear you guys.
Director Reed?
Yes.
Director Kranz?
Yes.
Director Hammond?
Yes.
Motion passes.
I apologize for the silly grin on my face, but we sent people to the moon and we can't get a good teleconferencing system to work, but we'll try our best. Yeah, item number 5, Pacific Surfliner peak period service to Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. Ms. Bergman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do believe that we have a couple of public comments on this particular item. We'll take comment after the presentation. Director Murray, I'm sorry, can you please mute your phone? Thank you. This effort represents years of work between multiple agencies to provide a peak period service from Los Angeles County, serving both Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. As we've reported over the last many months, the Losan agency assumed responsibility for advancing this effort following the execution of the Interagency Transfer Agreement, or the ITA. The effort represents a long-standing effort and goal of Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, is included in their sales tax measure and their in-motion plan. The agency has worked with Caltrans, the Coast Railroads, and Amtrak to develop a plan to provide peak period service to the communities, and the full details of that plan are before you today. You'll recall a little bit of history on this item. We explored a number of options leading us to this point. We explored all of the infrastructure that is currently in place. We explored the option of adding additional operating slots. We also explored options of having a separate operator provide this service for Santa Barbara and Ventura counties.
You can hear us though, right? If you can, press.
You're coming through loud and clear.
Okay.
In order to advance this effort in the time frame in which we're trying to advance it, and that's to implement in April of 2018, the best path forward for implementing the peak period service was to retime existing Pacific Surfliner trains, meaning we would not be seeking immediately any new operating slots to provide the service, but would instead provide it within the number of operating slots that we have in place. In developing and evaluating that schedule in coordination with the Amtrak and the Coast Railroads, there were a couple of primary goals that we were asked to maintain. One of those was to minimize all impacts to the Metrolink operation. The other was to protect our core service and ensure that the Pacific Surfliner continued to perform in the successful manner that it has. The schedule that is included in your agenda meets all of the intended goals to provide that peak period service and protect the two existing services as they operate today. The primary change in the schedule that you'll see before you is a bifurcation of train 761, the existing train 761. Your attachment B provides a comparative of what 761 operates as today and what it will look like following the approval and implementation of this plan. It will then be bifurcated into two trains, one that leaves San Diego in the 4 o'clock hour and the other that leaves Los Angeles in the 4 o'clock hour, serving that peak period service. That is the major change included in the retiming. All of those schedule provisions have been approved by the necessary host railroads, so that does include the Union Pacific and Metrolink with respect to this particular element. We have asked Amtrak to develop a cost estimate to provide this service, and in doing so, we've arrived at approximately $2.3 million per year additional subsidy to provide this service. That cost is driven primarily by labor. To facilitate the early morning service out of Los Angeles, we are required to open that station early, open the commissary early, open stations up line a little bit earlier, invest in another crew to operate that train. So those labor costs contribute significantly to the number that you see there before you. And addressing the cost sharing of that effort, CalStar and Caltrans have agreed to fund 50% of that increased subsidy. SBCAG has voiced intention to fund the other 50%. Their South Coast Sub-Regional Planning Committee voted in the affirmative to recommend to their full board that they approve the 50% share of that funding, and they'll be addressing that item at their full council or their full board meeting next month. We have every indication at this point that they will approve that in the affirmative, and they will contribute 50% of that additional operating subsidy. In order to facilitate this, we are also working very closely with the SBCAG staff to implement a robust marketing program. That marketing program may include things such as TV ads, radio ads, direct mail outs, face-to-face meetings with local businesses, with the chamber and others to ensure that passengers are aware that this, or potential passengers are aware that this service will exist. We've also worked to expand the reach of those first and last mile connections, specifically for LoSAN. That includes the transit transfer program. And with SBCAG and their partners, they are looking to facilitate those same types of transfers with all rubber-tired applications that meet those trains. A question has been raised a number of times in the development of this schedule and the implementation of this peak period service. And that question was, do we need additional equipment? At this time, we do not need additional equipment to effect this change. However, additional equipment will be required for any other schedule modifications or additions to service. So when we are ready to implement the 13th round trip, for example, we will need additional equipment. To that end, staff is continuing to advance efforts to secure additional equipment. We continue our conversations with the Great Lakes Central Railroad as well as Amtrak to provide that additional equipment necessary for the service. We will return to the board in the March timeframe with a full update on that equipment and the availability of the equipment. The additional equipment would also serve to ensure efficiencies and a better rotation of equipment used within the service so that we are providing the most efficient, effective, and reliable train sets that we can to provide our service. We do intend to return to the board in March also with the final agreement with SBCAG outlining the specific provisions of that operating subsidy contribution, as well as any other additional agreements related to marketing or fare promotions or fare buy-downs. The item before you today seeks to receive approval from the board to approve that schedule effective April 1, 2018, and also to authorize the managing director to enter into the necessary agreements with SBCAG to cost share on those items. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. Before I open up the board comments, I'd like to invite up Mayor Kathy Murillo from Santa Barbara here with the Santa Barbara CAG contingent for some comments, then I'll get the rest of the public comments after.
Esteemed Chair and board members, Kathy Murillo, Mayor of Santa Barbara. Speaking for City of Santa Barbara residents and our business community, I urge you to please approve this peak period service. We need support helping commuters move back and forth between Ventura and Santa Barbara counties and the region. It would also transport tourists and visitors, and we just have a lot of friends back and forth that would appreciate this transportation opportunity. We need to relieve traffic congestion on Highway 101, obviously. And I hear from members of our public that they want this ability, this train service, and indeed we've had high voter approval for local funding for expanded train service. And I know that Michael Bennett will speak eloquently on this. I appreciate your hearing my plea. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will say go Dons. If you're not from Santa Barbara, you won't know what that means, but that's okay. I'll explain it later. Mr. Paul Dyson.
Mr. Chair, board members, Paul Dyson with Railpack. I'm trying to squeeze this into 3 minutes if you indulge me if I go a little over. To be successful, a passenger rail commuter service needs to be punctual, frequent, reliable, flexible, competitive, and convenient. This proposed rail service scores low on all of these points. The railroad is much the same as it was in 1900. Union Pacific runs fewer but longer freight trains which do not fit some of the sidings, making it harder to dispatch. Metrolink trains were added in the 1990s. The line is close to capacity and easily stressed. Your statistics that are given to you every quarter, I guess, now reflect that reality. This is an unreliable, unpunctual service on this line. I've spoken over the years at many meetings of this body and its predecessors and in Santa Barbara about commuter service from Ventura. The thorn that no one wants to grasp is the fact that to run trains, you need track. Specifically, you need more line capacity. This means adding at least one siding between Ventura and Santa Barbara. But unfortunately, the logical place to do this, along Padaro Lane, would upset a few wealthy homeowners. And it seems that no one in Santa Barbara County has the will to point out that this will be accomplished in the existing right-of-way, that will result in just a half a dozen trains a day occupying the track for 5 to 10 minutes, and that the railroad was there long before the houses. This unwillingness to overcome the challenge of neighborhood concerns and invest in regional assets became painfully apparent when 101 was closed and the rail line could offer but a fraction of its potential as a relief route. If Santa Barbara is unwilling to pay the political price, small as it is, to increase line capacity, should the other counties be forced to participate in providing their commuter needs? If you don't build the track, if you don't increase the capacity, you cannot run a punctual, reliable railroad, and so the people won't show up to buy tickets. As for being competitive and convenient, I've pointed out many times that there was what was then called the Vista Bus, now the Coast Express, performs a competitive service. A logical approach, and one that gives the best value for taxpayer dollars, is to integrate any passenger rail commute service with the express bus. This will add to the number of frequencies and allow those whose work hours do not match the train times to have the option to take the train in one direction and the bus in the other. I don't see anything in the report to indicate that this is being done. Will this service compete with the intercity bus or cooperate and coordinate? Finally, I'm concerned about the legality of this, whether you should be co-mingling intercity funds and using them to provide commuter service. There are specific legal definitions and clear distinctions between these funding sources. Could Union Pacific come back at some point and decide that it's entitled to higher levels of compensation rather than the Amtrak intercity formula if you're running a commuter service? It's a pertinent question. Railpack is certainly not against new passenger rail service or attempting to serve new markets with existing service. We are concerned that if not well conceived and executed, such services will be a black eye for passenger rail and public transportation in general. For example, we had 3 attempts to run express trains between San Diego and Los Angeles. Each one failed. And they failed because, for the same reason we are warning about today, the lack of investment in the route capacity and improved speeds will result in a service that is mediocre and that few people will use. Please think carefully about this. You've got to have the track. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It's not a problem. Potential. It's in perception. We are not a commuter service. In fact, by state law, commuter rail is separately funded from intercity rail. We are an intercity rail. But this particular service is an intercity service. It is transportation between the city of Santa Barbara, the city of Ventura, and Point South. So therefore, it qualifies as an intercity service. Being in San Luis Obispo County and representing that area, this is going to disadvantage us in some ways by this retiming. But we recognize the needs of the entire corridor, not just our own needs in our area. And we trust that the entire corridor will accommodate our needs by working toward that additional trip for us in the near future so that we can still accommodate our people equally as well. We have been cooperative. We will continue to be cooperative. On the rail issue, I am already working in my capacity with other organizations at the national level in reminding our administration of the common carrier clause of the original charter that created the railroads. And that is for freight and passenger service to be done indiscriminately, equally, without any favor toward one or the other, which is not being done today. And we are urging the administration in Washington, D.C. to start enforcing that clause and making sure that the freight railroads that ceased doing their job when they gave up the passenger side and left it to us to create Amtrak to pick up their job, not to create a new service, but to actually do what they were charged with doing in the first place. And then to overcharge us for us doing part of their job is wrong. And we are trying to point that out nationally as well. So if we continue those efforts and we continue to try to provide adequate service to all people on an equal basis, we can be successful. As to this being a compromise, it is. We have a very difficult situation in reality right now between freight and the amount of track and the fact that the tracks are owned by the freight railroads, and that is their main concern. We need to make them more aware of our needs and their responsibility to respect our needs. And I think that is possible, but I think it's going to take a major effort on our part and all jurisdictions and people interested in transportation and integrating our total transportation system in the United States. When I say integrating, I'm talking about rail, highway, air, ports. We have to integrate the entire system, and we all have to be aware of that as we move forward. With that, I favor this particular interim measure, at least as an expensive experiment that we hope will work out well. But it's going to need some tweaking, and it's going to need a lot more commitment than I think it currently has from more agencies.
Thank you, and I hope I get this right, Director Fasano.
Yes, thank you. I too support this item. I think it's a step in the right direction, notwithstanding the capacity issues that have been pointed out by members of the public and people on this board that we try and work through. The one question I have is with the cessation of the 761 or the being truncated in Los Angeles, as we make this transition, I would hope and I really expect that we have some ambassadors on the ground to redirect those passengers to Metrolink options for continuing some of their trips, some of those options that will be lost. I think Metrolink can accommodate the capacity that might be shifted that direction, but from the standpoint of rail to rail and communicating with those passengers in advance that they will need to change their patterns, I would expect our staff to do that and to work with Metrolink. But that aside, I think we've made the best of a situation that can really benefit all parties.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to point out, as we go through this discussion, I would have to agree with the previous speakers that came up to the microphone. All of the deficiencies that I think we're all well aware of need to be corrected. And I'm optimistic over time we will be able to move forward to accomplish that, because that serves everyone's interest and will serve it very well. I'd like to point out some specific things in regards to Santa Barbara County. When Measure A was passed, it was passed by 80% of the electorate. That is pretty remarkable from what everybody tells us, that to receive that kind of support throughout the county. And those that are familiar with our county knows that there's certainly a division in political thought and approaches to things, yet everyone came together on this particular project, and this was one component of that particular project. Highway 101 widening was the #1 component that everyone got behind. So we're putting our money where our mouth is, if you will. We consider this to be incredibly important. We know for a fact that the 101 is impossible, even with widening it, that it's going to supply the necessary capacity to move people from the south through our county. It just isn't going to happen. And it's incredibly necessary that Los Angeles continues to San Luis, and I'm hoping someday maybe further north, because it is a regional issue in moving people from one point to another. And rail is a part of the solution, not the only solution, but a part of that solution that's so critically important. And this is a first step. I'd like to point out it's a pilot program, so we're going to learn, and the points and the deficiencies were pointed out. We have opportunities to correct that. And we are in fact going to be working on extending a siding and hopefully adding an additional siding that was lost due to storms that was spoken of near Padaro Lane. So, and there may be some other possibilities that exist as well that we'll have to see if we can't work out. So I think we're with eyes wide open. We recognize some of the shortfalls pointed out and that they need to be addressed. And SBK, with the funding that we have, we will have some money to put towards this, and where our expectation is to leverage those funds that we do have and continue to apply for grants that would improve the corridor. And I just can't say enough that our community has made it very, very clear this is what they want, this is what they expect, and they understand the intricacies and the challenges and difficulties when you have a corridor that is as busy and as robust as what we have, being the second busiest in the United States. That in itself is quite an accomplishment given the constraints that we have. So I ride the train frequently, and I have to say that during the mud flows and during the fire, where would we have been without the train? The train's really what saved our bacon. And having all of the other regional rails stand behind us and the efforts of our managing director to be able to get on the phone and talk with various people, including Union Pacific, they absolutely need to be lauded. I mean, the mud flows occurred early in the morning on the 9th, and by about 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock on the 11th, the rails were running. Not fast through our community, but they were running nonetheless. And we were able to begin to start moving people, which was critical. Any community that's had to deal with a natural disaster, we had nurses and doctors that couldn't get to the hospital. We had educators that couldn't get to school. We had police and firefighters, because many of them live in Ventura County. It's less expensive to live there. They couldn't get to work. I mean, I can go on and on about the critical employment that was impacted by the floods and the fire. And once again, this rail corridor really showed what is necessary, and there's no one that wants to see double tracking. I would love to see ownership, but those are a vision off into the future, and this is now. This is an opportunity to address an issue that I believe we will find over the next 2 years will work quite well, and we'll have a lot more knowledge at the end of the 2 years than what we have right now. So I would really ask for your support in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I think this is a very positive and important step forward. I do have one question as it pertains to the staff report and also the managing director's presentation. It references the transit transfer program, and we noted on the LA County side that the stopping the northbound progress of the train at Union Station is more than adequately filled by Metrolink. Continuing forward, I believe there's actually 4 or 5 trains. How does the transfer work there? Is that a separate fare, or is that covered within our rail, or is that only southbound that the rail covers?
Through the chairman, Director Perry, there are a number of options, as you've noted, available to passengers who wish to travel beyond Los Angeles on their journey. Trains 103 and 109, I believe, are the reasonable and immediate options for them, 20 minutes roughly on either side. And we will have a robust communication to passengers as part of that marketing and outreach effort to inform them of the changes to the schedule So in direct response to Director Fasana's question and to yours, Director Perry, we will instigate a robust communication. The rail-to-rail program will allow passengers to transfer between those two services. We can adjust that program as necessary. The program as it works today, generally speaking, is good within the limits of the Metrolink system that parallels the Surfliner system. So we will work with Metrolink to ensure that all passengers get to where they need to be.
Thank you. Director Murray, any comments?
Yes, thank you. Finally able to have things work appropriately. I think Director Strong said it quite aptly. This is a regional issue, and certainly one that I think we all need to support and collaborate with. The one thing I would like to see, and I think it's part of the staff report, is that we do some check-ins, whether it be a 6-month period or 12-month period, to see what things need to be adjusted accordingly. But it is, as you said, the second busiest corridor, and that speaks very, very highly, particularly with some of the congestion issues we've had. So I am fully supportive of it.
Thank you. I don't know why, but the phrase that comes to mind of "behold the turtle, he makes no progress till he sticks his neck out." And I'm not saying that we're sticking our neck out, but we are moving in a forward opportunity here. And to do that, you have to try something new and something different. I fully support this. I think it will be a good effort on our part. It may not be perfect, but there's always room for improvement, and you don't know until you try it. So what's the pleasure of the
Mr.
board?
Chairman, I would move approval of the staff recommendations.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Strong and second by Director Murray. Mr. Knowles?
Director Strong?
Yes.
Director Strong. Vice Chair Murray?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Chairman McDonald?
Yes.
Director Perry?
Yes.
Director Fasano?
Yes.
Director Reed?
Yes.
Director Cranes?
Yes.
Director Haviland?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes,
was remiss in noting to the board, we did receive a joint letter of support from a number of agencies in Santa Barbara County. A copy of that letter should be at the dais for each of you, and additional copies are available aside from members of the public.